The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with angry voices. Representatives from 800 worlds filled the massive chamber, their alien forms creating a sea of colors and shapes. At the center of it all, Ambassador Dae-ho Kim stood, alone at the human podium. His gray hair was perfectly combed, his uniform pressed and clean, but his hands shook slightly as he gripped the speaking platform. Around him, species after species rose to vote. Each vote was the same. Each vote pushed humanity further away from the galaxy they had called home for 300 years. The Altarian Collective votes to expel humanity from the Galactic Council, announced a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. The Draknari Empire agrees with expulsion, growled a reptilian creature whose scales reflected the chamber's lights. The Centaurian Federation supports the motion, said a being made entirely of flowing energy. Dae-ho closed his eyes for a moment. He had known this day would come. The accusations had been building for months. Humans were too aggressive, too violent, too willing to break rules when lives were at stake. The final accusation had come just 3 weeks ago. Captain Hyojin Park had disobeyed direct orders from the Council. A mining colony on Kepler 7 was under attack by space pirates. The Council had ordered all ships to stay away, claiming it was an internal matter for the local government to handle. But Hyojin had seen the distress signals. 50,000 civilians, including thousands of children, trapped on a burning world, while pirates stole everything of value. She had taken her battle group and gone in anyway. The rescue had been perfect. All 50,000 civilians were saved. The pirates were captured or destroyed. Not a single innocent person died. The Council was furious. "Order!" shouted the ancient ethereal speaker, a being so old that no one remembered what species it had originally been. Its voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "We will now vote on Resolution 847A, the complete expulsion of humanity from galactic space." The votes came in waves. 700 species voted yes, 800, only 12, voted no, mostly species that humanity had helped in the past. 3 others chose not to vote at all. Admiral Jiwoo Lee watched from the observation deck above. At 35, she was the youngest fleet admiral in human history. Her dark eyes tracked every vote, memorizing which species stood with humanity and which turned away. Beside her, Dr. Bong-Soo Choi worked quietly on a small device. The elderly scientist was uploading data to hidden servers throughout the galaxy. Medical techniques that had saved millions, engineering solutions that had built better worlds, scientific discoveries that had pushed the boundaries of knowledge. If humanity was leaving, at least their gifts to the galaxy would remain. "The vote is concluded," the ethereal speaker announced. 847 in favor, 12 opposed, 3 abstaining. Resolution 847A passes. The chamber erupted in cheers from some species, angry shouts from others. The speaker raised one glowing hand for silence. "Humanity is hereby stripped of all galactic citizenship. All human vessels will be escorted to the Galactic Rim. You are forbidden from returning to galactic space. Any attempt to do so will result in the complete destruction of your species." Dae-ho straightened his shoulders and stepped to the microphone. His voice carried clearly through the chamber. "Honored representatives," he began, his tone calm and steady. "For 3 centuries, humans have served alongside you. We have fought your wars. We have shared our knowledge. We have bled and died for worlds we had never seen, for people we had never met." The chamber grew quiet. "You say we are too aggressive, too willing to fight? Perhaps you are right. When we see innocent people suffering, we cannot stand by and watch. When we see evil attacking the weak, we must act. If that makes us dangerous to you, then perhaps we do not belong here." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had once called humans friends. "But remember this day. Remember the choice you have made. Because somewhere in this galaxy, there will come a time when evil rises again. When darkness threatens everything you hold dear. And when that day comes, you will wish that somewhere out there, humans still cared enough to fight." Security forces began moving toward the human delegation. Jiwoo and her people made their way toward the exits. As they left, she caught Daeho's eye and nodded once. The message was clear. They would remember. The exodus began immediately. From every world, every station, every outpost, humans were loaded onto transport ships. Families that had lived on alien worlds for generations were given hours to pack their lives into whatever they could carry. Captain Minho Jung watched from the bridge of his destroyer as Council security ships surrounded the human fleet. Hundreds of vessels carrying millions of people, all heading toward the rim of the galaxy where no one had ever lived before. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "Admiral Lee is broadcasting." Jiwoo's voice came through clearly on all human frequencies. "Citizens of Earth and her colonies. Today we leave the galaxy that raised us. We do so not in shame, but in sadness. We offered our friendship and were rejected. We offered our strength and were feared. We offered our protection and were cast out." Her voice grew stronger. "But we will not let this break us. We will build new homes among the stars. We will grow stronger. We will remember who we are and why we fight. And perhaps, someday, the galaxy will remember why they once needed us." The journey to the galactic rim took 3 months. 3 months of crowded ships and rationed food. 3 months of children asking why they had to leave their homes. 3 months of adults wondering if they would ever see the core worlds again. When they reached the rim, Earth was waiting. President So-Ra Han stood before the United Earth Assembly as the refugee ships arrived. The assembly hall was packed with representatives from every human world, every colony, every station. "My fellow humans," she began, "we have been abandoned by the galaxy we served. They feared our strength and rejected our friendship. But we will not despair." She gestured to the star charts showing the empty space beyond the galactic rim. "Here, in the dark, between galaxies, we will build something new. We will become stronger than ever before. We will develop new technologies, new capabilities, new ways to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Her voice rose with determination. "The galaxy abandoned us, but Earth remembers. We remember every world we saved, every life we protected, every time we stood between the darkness and the light." She looked out at the assembled representatives, at the millions watching on screens across human space. "They will forget about us. They will think we are gone forever, lost in the dark. Let them think that. Because when the time comes, when they need us most, we will be ready. Our warriors will fall from the sky. And they will remember why they once feared us, and why they should have treasured us instead." The human fleet dispersed into the darkness beyond the rim. Behind them, the galaxy continued as if they had never existed. Ahead of them lay the unknown. But humanity had never been afraid of the unknown. They had 17 years to prepare for whatever was coming. They intended to use every single day. Chancellor Theknaris of the Verdanian Republic stood at his office window, looking out at the peaceful city below. 17 years had passed since the humans were expelled from the galaxy. Most people had forgotten about them completely. His aide, a young Verdanian with bright green skin, entered carrying a datapad. "Sir, we have reports of unknown ships near the galactic rim. Some observers think they might be human vessels." Theknaris laughed, his 4 eyes blinking in amusement. "Humans. After all this time? If they survived at all, they are probably still fighting each other over scraps of metal. Humans were always too violent to build anything lasting." He waved his hand dismissively. "File the report and forget about it. We have more important things to worry about." But across the galaxy, something far worse than humans was stirring. Deep in the galactic core, where the oldest stars burned, dim and red, something moved in the darkness between worlds. Dr. Velteran of the Altarian Collective had been studying the strange signals for months. His blue skin was pale from working long hours without sleep. The data in front of him made no sense according to everything they knew about space and life. "Computer, show me the energy readings from Sector 7 Alpha again," he commanded. The holographic display showed a star system that had been home to 6 billion people just 2 weeks ago. Now it showed nothing but empty space and strange, twisted metal structures that seemed to move on their own. The entire Markian system, Velteron whispered to himself. Gone in 72 hours, not destroyed, consumed. He had been tracking the phenomenon as it spread through the core worlds. Whatever was doing this did not just kill everything in its path. It changed things, twisted them, made them into something else entirely. The first reports had come from deep space monitoring stations, ships made of living metal, creatures that looked like they had once been people but were now something horrible and wrong, and behind it all, a presence that seemed to think with the minds of 1 trillion consumed beings. The scientists had given it a name, the Void Swarm. On New Altair, the capital world of the Altarian collective, panic was beginning to spread. The Void Swarm had already consumed 17 star systems. Each time it struck, it grew stronger. Each time it learned something new. General Zexkoth of the Draknari Empire slammed his clawed fist on the strategy table. His reptilian features were twisted with frustration as he studied the tactical displays. Every weapon we use against them, they adapt to within hours, he growled. Plasma cannons? They develop shields. Quantum torpedoes? They absorb the energy and use it to grow stronger. How do you fight an enemy that learns from every attack? Admiral? Yilnessa of the Centaurian fleet flickered in her energy form, the closest thing her species could do to showing worry. Our greatest advantage has always been our technology, but the swarm takes our technology and makes it part of itself. She paused, her energy form dimming slightly. We need something they have never seen before, something completely new. The room fell silent. They all knew what she was thinking, but none wanted to say it out loud. We need the humans. Zexkoth finally whispered. The words hung in the air like a curse. Humans had been gone for 17 years. Even if they were still alive, even if they could be contacted, would they help? After what the galaxy had done to them? The Council will never agree to it, Yilnessa said sadly. Too much pride. Too much fear of what the humans might do if we let them back in. Meanwhile, on the research station Kepler Deep, Dr. Veltarin was making a horrifying discovery. He had been studying the remains of a swarm attack, trying to understand how the enemy operated. What he found made his blue skin turn pale with terror. The swarm does not just consume life. He spoke into his research log. It perverts it, takes everything that made a species unique and special, and turns it into a weapon. The Markians were peaceful traders. Now their merchant ships hunt down refugees and convert them into bioweapons. He pulled up another image. The Zephyrians were master engineers. The swarm has turned their building skills into the ability to construct massive hive structures in space. Every species that falls makes the swarm stronger in a new way. The implications were terrifying. The swarm was not just destroying civilization. It was stealing civilization and using it as a weapon against itself. As the months passed, the attacks grew bolder. The swarm was no longer content to hide in the core worlds. It began moving outward, consuming the middle rim planets. Billions died. Entire species vanished overnight. The galactic news networks showed the same images over and over. Cities on fire. Ships fleeing through space. Families separated forever as some escaped and others fell behind. On the pleasure world of Risa Prime, tourists looked up at the sky as strange lights appeared among the stars. At first, they thought it was a meteor shower. Then the lights began moving in formation, heading straight for the planet. The Void Swarm had arrived. The planetary defense fleet lasted 3 hours. The population centers fell in 6. By the end of the day, Risa Prime was gone. In its place was a twisted biomechanical structure that pulsed with the stolen life force of 8 billion souls. In the Galactic Council chamber, emergency sessions were called daily. Representatives who had once debated trade agreements and cultural exchanges now talked only of survival. We are losing this war, announced the ethereal speaker, its ancient voice heavy with despair. The swarm has consumed 43 star systems in the past month alone. Our combined fleets cannot even slow it down. Chancellor Thek Naris stood at his podium, no longer the confident leader he had been 17 years ago. We need new strategies, New weapons, new allies. There are no new allies, snapped General Zexkoth. Every species in the galaxy is already fighting for survival, and as for new weapons, he gestured helplessly at the tactical displays. Everything we build, the swarm learns to defeat. Deep in space, at the edge of known territory, automated monitoring stations detected massive energy readings, power outputs that made entire stars look dim. Objects moving at impossible speeds, leaving tears in space itself. The readings were so far beyond anything in the galactic database that most computers dismissed them as sensor errors. But a few curious scientists began to notice patterns in the data. The energy signatures were moving from the galactic rim toward the core, toward the void swarm, and there were hundreds of them. Dr. Vel Terran was one of the first to put the pieces together. He sat alone in his laboratory, staring at the impossible readings, when the truth hit him like a physical blow. They have been watching, he whispered to the empty room. All this time, they have been watching and waiting. He thought about the 17 years of silence from the galactic rim. 17 years during which everyone had assumed the humans were gone, dead or scattered or fighting among themselves. But what if they had been doing something else entirely? What if they had been preparing? His hands shook as he pulled up the old files from the human expulsion. He remembered Ambassador Dae Ho Kim's final words to the Council. When that day comes, you will wish that somewhere out there, humans still cared enough to fight. Had that day finally arrived? On the bridge of his research vessel, Captain Subin, Im of the science ship Busan Rising, was conducting a routine survey mission near the galactic rim when her sensors detected something that should not have existed. A structure, massive beyond comprehension, orbiting what appeared to be an artificial star. Communications, she ordered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Are you detecting any transmissions from that thing? Her communications officer, a young man named Tae Ho, looked up from his console with wide eyes. Yes, ma'am. But you are not going to believe this. The transmissions are in Korean. Subin felt the blood drain from her face. After 17 years of silence, the humans were not only alive, they had built something in the darkness that defied all understanding. And from the energy readings her ship was detecting, they were getting ready to use it. The galaxy had forgotten about humanity. But as the void swarm continued its relentless advance, consuming world after world, strange reports began filtering in from the outer rim. Dark ships moving between the stars, energy signatures that broke the laws of physics. And sometimes in the deepest space where no one should have been able to survive, glimpses of vessels that looked like they were built from shadows and starlight. Something was coming. Something the galaxy had cast out 17 years ago. The humans were returning, and they were bringing gifts that the galaxy was not prepared to receive. The siege of Drachnos Prime entered its third week with no hope in sight. General Zexkoth crouched in the ruins of what had once been the planetary command center. Around him, his soldiers fired desperately at the void swarm creatures that poured through the streets like a living nightmare. The creatures had once been people, Draknari civilians, twisted and changed by the swarm into biomechanical horrors that hunted their own families. Zexkoth could still see traces of who they had been in their faces, which made killing them even harder. General, his communications officer called out between explosions. The orbital defense platforms are down. The swarm has complete control of the system. Zexkoth nodded grimly. 6 billion people lived on Drachnos Prime. In another day, maybe 2, they would all be dead or worse, converted into weapons for the swarm to use against the next world. He activated his emergency transmitter, broadcasting on all frequencies. This is General Zexkoth, Drachnos Prime Command. The capital has fallen. The swarm has our genetic templates. They will use our people against the next world. Emperor, save us all. As he finished speaking, something impossible happened. The stars exploded. No, that was not right. The stars did not explode. Instead, space itself seemed to tear apart in dozens of places around Drachnos Prime. Through these impossible tears came ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were massive, so large that they made the biggest Draknari battleships look like toys. Black as the void between stars, they moved with a grace that seemed wrong for something so huge. And they were fast. Impossibly fast. On the bridge of the lead vessel, Admiral Hyojin Park studied the tactical display. She was older now, her hair completely gray, her face marked with scars from 17 years of preparation for this moment. But her eyes still burned with the same fire that had driven her to rescue those civilians so long ago. "All units, this is actual," she broadcast to her fleet. "You know why we are here. Not for glory, not for revenge. We are here because someone has to be." The human fleet did not look like any ships the galaxy remembered. These vessels seemed to shift and flow like living things. Their hulls were not made of metal or ceramic, but something that bent light around it, making them hard to see clearly. Captain Min Ho Jang commanded the destroyer Soul's Fury from a bridge that existed in multiple dimensions at once. His crew was young, all born during the exile, raised on stories of the galaxy that had cast their parents out. This was their first real battle, but they had trained for it their entire lives. "Admiral," he reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "Enemy formations are extensive. I count over 10,000 swarm vessels in the system." "Then we go through them," Park replied simply. The human attack was unlike anything the Draknari had ever witnessed. Instead of conventional weapons, the human ships deployed technologies that seemed to break the basic laws of reality. Reality anchors fired from the human vessels, creating fields where the swarm's adaptation abilities simply stopped working. Quantum fire burned through multiple dimensions at once, destroying swarm ships before they even realized they were under attack. But the most terrifying sight was the Wraith fighters. Taemin Ko led the first wave, but calling him a pilot was not quite accurate anymore. His consciousness was distributed across 17 different bodies simultaneously, each one existing in a separate fighter craft. To observers, he appeared to be in 18 places at once, each version of himself moving with inhuman precision. He had volunteered for the enhancement process 3 years ago, knowing the risks. The surgery had taken weeks. The recovery had taken months. When it was over, he was no longer entirely human. But he could fight in ways that no normal person could imagine. His 17 bodies swept through the swarm formations like death itself. Each fighter moved independently but with perfect coordination, slicing through biomechanical ships that would have taken conventional fleets hours to destroy. Dr. Bong-Soo Choi watched the battle from the research ship Incheon's Hope. The elderly scientist had spent the last 17 years developing the weapons humanity now used. Reality anchors, quantum fire, consciousness transfer technology, devices that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. "Deploy the restoration field," he ordered quietly. Around Drachnus Prime, a strange energy began to emanate from the human ships. Wherever it touched the swarm's converted victims, something miraculous happened. The biomechanical changes began to reverse. Draknari citizens who had been twisted into monsters slowly returned to their original forms. It was not just a weapon. It was mercy. General Zexkoth watched in amazement as his converted soldiers began to change back into themselves. The creatures that had been hunting him just minutes ago were now confused, frightened people who did not understand what had happened to them. "Impossible," he whispered. "The swarm conversion process cannot be reversed. Our best scientists tried, for years." The battle lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. When it was over, every swarm vessel in the system had been destroyed. Every converted victim had been restored. The biomechanical structures that the swarm had built were dissolved back into their original materials. Most importantly, not a single civilian had died during the liberation. As quickly as they had appeared, the human ships began to fade away. Not destroyed, they simply activated the same reality-tearing technology that had brought them here and vanished back into the darkness between stars. But before they left completely, Admiral Park opened a communication channel to the planet below. "General Zexkoth," her voice came through clearly despite the interference. "Your people are safe. The swarm presence in this system has been eliminated. We leave you with our restoration technology. Use it to help others. Wait, Zexkoth called out desperately. Who are you? Why did you help us? There was a long pause before Park answered. We are who we have always been, the ones who stand between the darkness and the light. The communication ended, and the last human ship disappeared through a tear in space. Across the galaxy, news of Drachnos Prime spread like wildfire. The impossible had happened. A void swarm infestation that should have taken months to contain had been completely eliminated in hours. Better yet, the victims had been saved rather than killed. Similar reports began flowing in from 12 other sectors. Each told the same story. Dark ships appearing from nowhere. Weapons that defied physics. Complete destruction of swarm forces with minimal civilian casualties. Then vanishing without a word. On the trade station Deep Space Nine, Captain Subin docked her science vessel and immediately headed for the intelligence briefing room. What she had seen at the Galactic Rim needed to be reported to someone in authority. They have been watching us, she told the assembled officers. For 17 years they have had monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. They knew about the void swarm before we did. They have been preparing. Admiral Yil Nessa flickered with surprise in her energy form. Monitoring stations? Where? Everywhere, Subin replied, calling up her sensor data. Hidden bases in asteroid fields, observation posts in nebulae, research stations orbiting dead stars. They have been mapping swarm movements, studying our technology, tracking our military capabilities. The implications were staggering. While the galaxy had been fighting for survival, humanity had been conducting a silent intelligence operation on a scale that defied comprehension. But why? Asked General Zexkoth, who had traveled to Deep Space Nine specifically for this briefing. Why watch? Why wait? If they could defeat the swarm so easily, why let so many worlds fall? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Vel-Taran had been monitoring human communications frequencies when he intercepted a transmission from Dr. Wansu Park, Earth's Director of Xenological Studies. We have been developing countermeasures for the void swarm for 12 years, the transmission said. We knew they would reach the inner galaxy eventually. We also knew the Council would never ask for our help until it was almost too late. The human strategy was becoming clear. They had not just been hiding in the darkness beyond the rim. They had been building, learning, preparing for a war that the galaxy did not even know was coming. But questions remained. What had humanity become during their exile? How had they developed technology that made their former capabilities look primitive? And most importantly, what price had they paid for becoming strong enough to save a galaxy that had cast them out? Admiral Yil Nessa got her answer when she received a direct communication from her old friend, Admiral Dong-Hyun Yu. They had served together before the exile, back when humans and aliens fought side by side. The face that appeared on her screen was barely recognizable as human. Dong-Hyun's eyes had been replaced with quantum processors that glowed with blue light. His arms were now articulated weapon systems that could reshape themselves into any form needed. Neural implants covered half his skull, connecting his brain directly to his ship's systems. "Hello, old friend," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that no human throat could produce. "I know I look different. We all do." "What did you do to yourselves?" Yil Nessa asked, her energy form dim with horror. Dong-Hyun was quiet for a moment. "We paid the price for becoming strong enough to save you. Some of us are barely human anymore." The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so crowded. Representatives from hundreds of species packed every available space, their voices creating a chaos of sound that the ethereal speaker could barely control. Fear filled the air like smoke. Chancellor Theknaris struggled to maintain order as delegates shouted over each other. Some demanded protection, others begged for human aid. A few even suggested surrender to the void swarm, claiming it was better than owing their survival to the species they had exiled. "Order!" The ethereal speaker's voice boomed through the chamber. "We will have order." The noise gradually died down as Dr. Vel-Taran took the speaking platform. The Altarian scientist looked exhausted, his blue skin pale from weeks of sleepless research. But his findings were too important to delay. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I have completed my analysis of the human interventions. The results are unprecedented." He activated the holographic display, showing battle recordings from Drachnos Prime and 11 other systems. The images were clear. Human ships appearing from tiers in space itself, deploying weapons that bent reality, then vanishing without a trace. "The humans are not simply using advanced technology," Velteran continued. "They are using technologies that should not exist, quantum manipulation that allows them to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, consciousness transfer that lets single individuals control dozens of bodies, reality anchors that prevent the swarm from adapting to their attacks." The chamber buzzed with nervous whispers. Admiral Yil Nessa flickered in her energy form as she stood to address the assembly. "According to our models," she said, "developing these capabilities should have taken thousands of years. Even with their technological base from before the exile, the advancement we are seeing is impossible. Unless," added General Zexkoth from his seat, "they had a very compelling reason to accelerate their development. The truth that no one wanted to speak hung in the air. Humanity had not just survived their exile, they had used it as an opportunity to become something far beyond what they had been before." Captain Subin Im presented her report next, describing the massive installations she had discovered at the Galactic Rim. Her voice shook slightly as she recalled what she had seen. "They have been watching us for 17 years, she said. Deep space monitoring stations tracked every swarm movement, every council decision, every military development across the galaxy. They knew this war was coming before we did." She pulled up sensor readings that showed structures the size of moons, powered by artificial stars, hidden in the darkness beyond the rim. "The scale of their operation is beyond anything we imagined. They have built an entire civilization out there, one designed specifically for war against the Void Swarm." The implications were staggering. While the galaxy had been conducting its normal business, trade and politics and cultural exchanges, humanity had been preparing for a conflict that most species did not even know existed. Dr. Wansu Parks intercepted. Transmission played throughout the chamber, his words echoing in the stunned silence. "We knew the Council would never ask for our help until it was almost too late." "They were right," whispered Chancellor Theknaris, his four eyes wide with realization. "We would never have contacted them. Even now, with worlds burning, half the Council still opposes any cooperation with humans." The debate that followed was fierce. Some representatives argued that humanity's return was a gift, that they should be welcomed back with full honors and citizenship. Others claimed it was a trap, that humans were using the crisis to force their way back into galactic society. A few, led by the crystalline hegemony's ambassador Shal Nara, went further. "How do we know the humans did not create the Void Swarm?" "Themselves?" she asked, her crystal body ringing like a bell with emotion. "They appear just when we are most desperate. They have weapons perfectly designed to fight this specific enemy. It is too convenient." The accusation created an uproar. Dr. Velteran stood again, his voice sharp with anger. "The Void Swarm has been active in the galactic core for over 50 years, he said firmly. "Humans were still living among us when the first signs appeared. They could not have created it. But the damage was done. Trust, already fragile after 17 years, cracked further under the pressure of desperation and fear. Meanwhile, human forces continued their systematic campaign against the swarm. Reports came in daily of impossible victories. Entire swarm fleets destroyed without the air, humans losing a single ship. Converted populations restored to their original forms, biomechanical structures dissolved back into harmless materials. But the cost of humanity's transformation was becoming clear to those who looked closely. Commander Jahyun Lee of the rescue vessel, Incheon's light made contact with a Centaurian research station that had intercepted human communications. What they had recorded made her question everything she thought she knew about her own species. The transmissions showed human crews working together with perfect coordination, but their voices carried harmonics that suggested artificial enhancement. Video feeds revealed personnel who existed simultaneously in multiple locations, their consciousness distributed across different bodies. Most disturbing were the medical reports. Humans who had undergone the enhancement processes showed cellular changes that pushed them far beyond normal human parameters. Extended lifespans, enhanced cognitive abilities, direct neural interfaces with their technology, but at the cost of becoming something that was no longer entirely human. "We chose this," Admiral Dong-Hyun Yu had said during his communication with Yilnesa. "We chose to become what you needed us to be." But some in the galaxy wondered if humanity had chosen to become something else entirely. The question came to a head during a joint operation to liberate the research world of Kepler Station. The Void Swarm had converted the planet's population of scientists into a biomechanical thinking machine, using their collective intelligence to develop new weapons and strategies. Human forces arrived within hours of the distress signal, but this time they were not alone. A combined fleet of galactic species had followed them, hoping to study their tactics and technology. What they witnessed challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. The human assault was not just precise, it was artistic. Ships that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously struck from angles that should not have been possible. Weapons that used the fundamental forces of the universe itself carved through swarm defenses like they were made of paper. But the most incredible sight was the liberation itself. Human soldiers, if they could still be called that, phased through solid matter to reach the converted scientists. They used technology that seemed to reach directly into the biomechanical matrix and extract the original human minds, leaving the swarm components to dissolve harmlessly. Captain Minho Jiang, commanding Seoul's Fury during the operation, existed simultaneously in 17 different locations across the battlefield. His enhanced consciousness coordinated the rescue of 50,000 scientists with perfect precision, saving every single life. When it was over, the galactic observers were left with a disturbing question. Were these beings still human, or had they become something else entirely? Something that looked human, fought for human values, but operated according to principles that no natural species could understand? Admiral Yilnesa found her answer during a private communication with Admiral Hyojin Park after the Kepler Station liberation. Park's image flickered between multiple versions of herself, each one slightly different, as if she existed in several realities at once. "We know what you are thinking," Park said, her voice carrying the weight of 17 years of transformation. "You wonder if we are still human, if we have become the very thing the galaxy feared we would become." Yilnesa's energy form dimmed, with sadness. "Have you?" Park was quiet for a long moment, her multiple images synchronizing into a single, clear form. "We have become what we needed to become to save you, whether that makes us human or something else." She shrugged. "Does it matter, as long as the innocent survive?" "But what happens when the war is over?" Yilnesa asked. "What happens to a species that has changed itself so completely?" "We will face that question when the time comes," Park replied. "Right now, our focus is on ensuring there is a future for everyone to worry about." As the communication ended, Yilnesa was left with a sobering realization. Humanity had not just returned to save the galaxy, they had sacrificed their very nature to do it. The species that had been cast out for being too human had become something beyond humanity itself. And they had done it not for revenge, not for power, but for the same reason they had always fought: to protect those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy owed them everything, but what they had paid for that protection might be more than any species should ever have to give. In the depths of space, at monitoring stations scattered across the galactic rim, human sentries maintained their eternal watch. They were no longer recognizable as the species that had been exiled 17 years ago. Enhanced beyond normal limits, existing in multiple dimensions, their consciousness distributed across vast networks of interconnected minds. But in their transformed hearts, the fire still burned. The galactic core had become a place of nightmares. Where once a billion stars had burned bright, now only darkness remained. At the center of it all, the Void Swarm's prime nexus pulsed with malevolent life, a structure larger than entire solar systems built from the consumed matter of 1,000 worlds. Dr. Velteron studied the impossible readings from his research station at the edge of safe space. The Nexus was not just large, it was wrong. It existed in dimensions that should not touch normal space, drawing power from sources that violated every law of physics. It has been growing for millennia, he reported to the assembled galactic leaders. Every world the swarm consumes adds to its mass, its intelligence, its ability to birth new horrors. If we do not stop it soon, it will become too powerful to defeat. General Zexkoth slammed his clawed fist on the strategy table. Stop it? We cannot even get close to it. Every fleet we send is converted before they can fire a shot. The Nexus turns our own ships against us. But even as the galactic leaders despaired, something was stirring in the darkness beyond the rim. Hidden bases that had remained secret for 17 years began powering up systems that drew energy from artificial stars. Weapons that had taken decades to develop were loaded onto ships that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Humanity was preparing for its greatest battle. Admiral So-Young Kim stood on the bridge of Earth Actual, the command ship built around humanity's homeworld itself. The bridge was a vast chamber where 1,000 human minds worked in perfect synchronization, their consciousness linked through neural networks that allowed them to think and plan as a single entity. Kim herself existed simultaneously in the physical world and as a distributed consciousness across the entire human fleet. Her awareness stretched across hundreds of thousands of ships, each one a miracle of technology that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. All units, she broadcast, her voice reaching across dimensions to every human vessel. This is what we trained for. This is why we chose to become more than what we were. Today we do not just save the galaxy, we free it. The human response was overwhelming. From hidden bases scattered across the galactic rim, the entire human fleet emerged. Not hundreds of ships, but hundreds of thousands. Vessels that dwarfed space stations moved alongside fighters that phased in and out of reality. Mobile research. Platforms that manipulated gravity itself accompanied destroyers that could exist in 7 dimensions at once. Captain Jahyun Lee commanded the rescue ship Incheon's Light from a bridge that existed across multiple planes of existence. Her mission was perhaps the most important of all, to liberate the billions of minds that the swarm had absorbed and converted into its collective consciousness. Mercy protocols are active, she reported to Admiral Kim. We are ready to begin. Mass consciousness extraction. The human fleet approached the prime nexus like angels of death descending from heaven. But they brought not just destruction, they brought salvation for every soul the swarm had claimed. The battle that followed defied every rule of warfare ever written. Human ships moved through space-time itself, striking from angles that did not exist. Weapons that used the fundamental forces of creation carved away at the nexus like sculptors working with clay. Tae-Min Ko, his consciousness now distributed across over 100 fighter craft, led the assault on the nexus's defensive networks. Each of his bodies moved with perfect coordination, dancing between biomechanical guardians that had once been entire species. Breach achieved in Sector 7, he reported, his voice coming from dozens of locations simultaneously. Moving to disable the consciousness harvesting nodes. But the true miracle was the mercy weapons. Dr. Bong-Soo, Choi had spent 15 years developing technology that could reach into the swarm's collective mind and extract the individual consciousness patterns of those who had been consumed. It was not just a weapon, it was resurrection. Wherever the ear, mercy fields touched the nexus, something extraordinary happened. The biomechanical structure began to dissolve, revealing the original matter beneath. More importantly, streams of light began emerging from the dying structure, the souls of billions, freed from their mechanical prison and restored to their original forms. Captain Min Ho-jung watched in amazement as his ship's sensors detected impossible readings. Entire species that had been thought extinct for centuries were being restored to life. The Markians, consumed in the early days of the HFY War. The Zephyrians, whose engineering skills had been perverted by the swarm. Even species so old that their names had been forgotten. But the cost was enormous. Human ships died by the thousands, their crews sacrificing themselves to punch through the Nexus's defenses. Commander Ji-Sung-Oh led his entire battle group in a suicide run against the core structure, his final transmission echoing across the fleet. For everyone we could not save before, the Nexus fought back with the fury of a dying god. It unleashed weapons that should not have existed, reality-bending attacks that tried to erase human ships from existence itself. Biomechanical horrors the size of moons emerged from its depths, each one crafted from the nightmares of 1,000 species. But humanity had prepared for this moment for 17 years. Every attack the Nexus used, they had developed countermeasures for. Every horror it birthed, they had weapons designed to cleanse. Admiral Hyojin Park, her consciousness now existing across multiple dimensions simultaneously, coordinated the final assault. Her ships moved like ghosts through space-time, striking at the Nexus's core while avoiding its most devastating attacks. All units, final phase, she broadcast. Remember, we are not here to conquer. We are here to free. The climax came when Admiral Kim herself led Earth Actual into the heart of the Nexus. The massive command ship, carrying humanity's homeworld within its protective shell, descended into the biomechanical hell at the center of the structure. What they found there was the source of all the galaxy's nightmares, a consciousness so vast and alien that it had consumed the minds of trillions and welded them into a single, horrific entity. The Nexus was not just a weapon or a base, it was alive and it was in agony. "I can hear them," whispered Dr. Won-Soo Park, his enhanced neural interfaces allowing him to touch the edges of the collective mind. "All the souls trapped inside. They are screaming to be free." Kim nodded, her distributed consciousness focusing into a single point of determination. "Then we free them. All of them." The final weapon was not a device of destruction, but of liberation. Humanity deployed the Restoration Matrix, a field generator that reached into the quantum structure of the Nexus itself, and began the impossible task of separating individual consciousness patterns from the collective. It was like performing surgery on the universe itself. One by one, billion by billion, the trapped minds were extracted and restored to their original forms. Species that had been extinct for millennia took their first breaths in centuries. Civilizations that had been lost to history were given new life. But the process was agony for the humans who performed it. To touch so many minds, to feel the pain and terror of trillions of souls, broke something fundamental in those who attempted it. Many died from the mental strain. Others survived but were forever changed, carrying the memories of entire species within their enhanced consciousness. As the Nexus died, it screamed across 17 dimensions. The sound was not heard, but felt, a psychic death cry that echoed through every mind in the galaxy. And then suddenly there was silence. The prime Nexus was gone. In its place floated the restored matter of 1,000 worlds and the reborn souls of trillions of beings. The Void Swarm, deprived of its central intelligence, began to dissolve across the galaxy as its component parts reverted to their original forms. The war was over, but the cost had been tremendous. Hundreds of thousands of human ships had been destroyed. Millions of human souls had been changed beyond recognition. The species that had entered the battle was not the same one that emerged victorious. 6 months later, Ambassador Dae-ho Kim returned to the Galactic Council chamber. He was ancient now, kept alive only by technology that blended his consciousness with quantum processors, but his eyes still burned with the same fire that had driven humanity for so long. The chamber was different too. Representatives from species thought extinct for centuries now sat alongside familiar faces. The Markians, their fur still bearing traces of biomechanical scarring. The Zephyrians, their crystalline forms slightly altered by their time in the collective. Even representatives from species so old that their names existed only in legends. 17 years ago, Dae-ho began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. You cast us out because you feared what we were. You were right to fear us. We were dangerous, unpredictable, aggressive. He gestured to the vast display showing the renewed galaxy, Worlds rebuilding, species recovering, the swarm's corruption being systematically healed by human restoration technology. You expected us to become bitter, to seek revenge. Instead, we chose to become what the galaxy needed us to be. Your guardians, your protectors, the warriors who fall from the sky when all hope is lost. The chamber was utterly silent. Even the mom, ethereal speaker had dimmed its glow in respect. We decline your offers of membership, territory, and treaties, Deho continued. We do not want to rule the galaxy, or even join it officially.